25 in order. Mr. Secretary, you please call the roll.
Yes. Member Laura Ragsdale.
Present.
Member Tim Spiegelglass.
Present.
Member Jenna Nat, absent for the moment. Member Petrie Powell. Member Felicia Ford. Secretary Sam Wallach, present. And Chairman Rob Jagel.
Present. Let it also, did you want to jump in or?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought you were jumping in. Sorry. Let it also be known that our city council liaison, Brian Lewis, is in attendance, as well as our staff liaisons, Carlos Trejo, Director of Olivet's Planning Community Development Department, Don Doty, Senior Planner, and Jack Carswell, Planning and Zoning Administrator, as well as Stephanie Carr, our city attorney. So thank you for being in attendance. We appreciate it. And also thank you for the new members that are joining. This is very exciting. It's very helpful, to have a full board, because otherwise it makes things a little more challenging to make sure we have quorum. So we appreciate that, and I'm glad they gave you enough information that you were excited to join. So, we're going to do tonight's meeting a little different. Tonight's meeting is more of a roundtable where we don't necessarily have petitions coming in front of us. And we are currently waiting one member that's still not here. But at this point in time, we will take on public comments. These are not related to agenda items, but are just regular public comments. And we do ask if there's anybody online that has a public comment, we ask you to, look for the button to raise your hand. That's down there. Is there anybody online, Carlos? Oh, okay. Well, then I won't go through any more further instructions online. It looks like we have a new member or new members in attendance. We appreciate it. No worries. And I forgot your name, and I apologize. Jenna, we're going to go quickly around the room, kind of introduce everybody here as well. My name's Rob Jurgiel. I'm the chairman. Go ahead, Sam, to the right.
Secretary Sam Wallach. Secretary Sam Wallach.
Yes. Have to get used to it.
Alicia Ford.
Jenna Nat. Laura Ragsdale.
Tim Spiegelglass.
Petrie Powell.
Brian Lewis. Jack Carswell.
Don Doty.
Stephanie Carr.
And I'm Carlos Trejo. I'm the planning director. And Ms. Nat and Ms. Ford. So just so you know, Jack and Don are our planning staff members here. And of course, Ms. Carr is our city attorney. And they're generally just attends the city council meetings, but we had invited her over to kind of help us go through an overview in there. All right, Chairman.
And Brian used to be a member of planning and zoning before he abandoned us to go on to city council. So we're glad that he decided to come back, to be in his role. So we appreciate that. So we just did the introductions as well, and we're going into public comments. So if there's anybody in the audience that has a public comment, we do ask you to come up here and we do ask you to state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name's Martha Turner. I live at 706 Elkington Lane. I'm here to speak in support of the tree ordinance. One of the great aspects of living in Olivet is the trees that we have. I don't know if it's still part of the logo, but it was part of the logo for quite a while. And it's really an important feature of our community. I want to give an example of how a lack of tree ordinance has affected us personally. It's about 5 years ago, a property kitty corner behind us was a tear down. And before they came, I believe it would have been before this committee to get final approval of the plans, they had already cut down two 50 to 60 foot trees. When I discussed this with the developer who lied to the council and said he was moving into the house, which apparently is done often, he was not moving into the house. He said that those trees were dead. But we went over the next morning and looked at the trees that had been cut down. Okay, I'm not an arborist, but they looked fine to me. And this has radically altered the properties around that, because even though I understand it was on their property and it was on the edge of the property, it totally changed our backyard because of the shade and beauty of those trees were gone. So I'm very encouraged that Olivet is looking at what many communities do to protect the trees when new construction happens. I want to ask you, even though this is different, my son lives near Wydown and Skinker. And if you've driven down between Big Bend and Wydown, I'm sorry, on Wydown between Big Bend and Skinker, it's an horrific change. Okay, that's a tornado that, you guys can't control that kind of thing. But my son's neighborhood is altered for my lifetime because those trees are all gone. And again, I'm not comparing this to a tornado. What I'm saying is you have the ability to keep this community green and leafy. And we all know what trees do for the environment, as well as people's mental health, shading, the temperature. There's tons of reasons to protect the trees we have. And I really hope you will consider the ordinance, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
comments. Is there anybody else in attendance that has a public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. No, no worries. We appreciate you made the time and efforts to come and give your thoughts. Mhm. Okay, we'll move into our work session format. Carlos?
Sure, Chairman, if it's okay. So we're going to have a format where we'll have this is to be a discussion, so it's not a public comment or discussion with the public, especially with the city attorney in here. We're going to give a quick staff presentation, then have an opportunity to talk with Ms. Carr, and then we'll continue our presentation regarding our memos and review process. And then if time permits, we'll get into the tree regulations. We won't have any action items to address. It was a goal, but I think given the time and on some other things, we don't have anything scheduled for August 7th, so that will probably be another work session focused solely on the trees after everybody's now back
Great.
in place. Okay.
That sounds great.
All right, we are live streaming and recording, so yes, I urge you to use your mic if possible. The council generally does not record their work sessions, and they just produce the minutes. We are going to go ahead and do so because I know there's a lot of interest, and we get a lot of viewers, so that's always neat. All right, so we had the public comments, and then in terms of the format, I'm going to go over the commission's role and responsibilities real quickly. Then I'll talk about the review types and the comprehensive plan. Then we'll have Ms. Carr. She's been given a copy of several questions that we put together. I hope everybody had an opportunity to look through those. And then if you had any additional questions, please to share those with Ms. Carr. And then Jack's going to go over the staff review and reports. And then again, after that, time permitting, if we can talk about the tree inventory in there, Jack had put together some analysis on the calculations and wants to talk about some of the pros and cons of some of the various scenarios in there.
Okay.
I will note on your dais is the latest version of the tree draft, and that is the June 26th version. I think what we have posted on the website was the May version, and only because we've had different variations of this, it's gotten a little confusing, but we'll make sure we get that updated. All right, just for the commission's purposes, the Planning and Zoning Commission here in the city of Olivet, as actually the Plan and Zoning Commission was established in 1939 in there. We were incorporated in 1932, so it took them 7 years to set the commission, and then the role and responsibilities of the commission per state statutes was quickly to set up the zoning map and the zoning ordinance in that process. And you can see 3 years later, they adopted the city's first zoning ordinance in 1941. through that, I'm not sure how the review process was set, but in 1961, the city had a community design review board. And in most communities, that's an architectural review board. So they were solely looking at building aesthetics. Um, and there in 1992, they merged the Plan and Zoning Commission along with the Community Design Review Board. So they took the traditional Planning and Zoning Commission and the Architectural Review Board, merged them into one, and created the Planning and Community Design Commission. And that was pretty recent. That was in 1992. Prior to that, I would assume that like for a new home, that was probably going to the Design Review Board for an aesthetic review and action. And the commission was probably taking care of, text amendments, special permits, and, overseeing the comprehensive plan and more planning aspects of that. There are some communities in which you have to go through both. That was a possibility too, in there. The planning commission is referenced in our municipal code, section 125.050. I won't go into the specific details, but just so you have reference. And we have a 7-member commission. When I started, I think we started with 11. We went down to 9. And then in 2006, I think we reduced it to 7 in there. Of those 7 members, 4 members are required to have some type of design background, whether it's architecture, engineering, planning, even legal or real estate background, and everybody serves 4-year terms in there.
Carlos, do you know why they reduced it from 9 to 7?
The difficulty was meeting quorums.
Really?
Yes. And today we still had the same difficulty in there. But yes, I know back in 2002, we were meeting, I think like once a month, and it was always a 50-50 if I was going to have a quorum.
Wow.
In there. And then another thing that it says, that you're supposed to perform all the duties of the zoning and plan commission as described under Missouri law. And their Missouri law has you. It's kind of interesting. Stephanie could probably talk about it a little bit more in detail, into details. But you are one of the only, bodies outside of the council referenced in state statutes that the council has delegated some of its authority, that being for land review, to the commission and to be advising to the council in there. And really, that's the only power like the council, I don't want to say gives up, but provides, another board or group an opportunity to advise in that process. That way, the intent is that then the council can focus more on the policy and aspects of that. And that's how it's set. So like a Parks Commission and Economics Development Commission, those aren't called out in state statutes. They are in our municipal code. But you, along with the Zoning Board of Appeals, are 2 that are actually called out in the state statutes for specific roles.
And without all of you guys and without the plan commission, the city could not exercise its zoning authority. So then the city wouldn't be able to regulate land use and everything that they do through its zoning code. So you are essential to the exercise of that authority.
So. All right. So one of your other roles and responsibilities is you are stewards of the comprehensive plan. For those of you just joining us, the commission last year completed, probably we went 18 months, 2 years of updating our comprehensive plan. We are required to do so in there. And what it is, it's a 20-year outlook of what we want the city to be in there. And it is a document that only the plan commission is responsible for. We're kind of the stewards. It doesn't tie the council to make any decisions based on the plan, but it helps us direct the council in terms of how we want the city to grow and be in the next 20 years. Well, when I started here, we adopted our first plan. Well, we adopted a plan in 2006 that was about identity. One of the concerns of the community was that, if you drove from Creve Coeur, from Lindbergh, let's say, to McKnight, you would not notice when you left Creve Coeur, when you entered all of that, and when you were in U City. And the goal was that they wanted to develop a community that had a character of its own. So in 2006, we adopted the plan, and that plan has been pretty well implemented, and it has created a lot of the developments that you see today. Before, we used to require buildings to be set away from the street. Now we encourage buildings to come up by the street. We also create, we used to have asphalt sidewalks along Olive. Now they're full-size sidewalks, and we're trying to improve the overall streetscape and appearance to create an identity and a character of our own. The recent comprehensive plan we call the 2024 update is now about building community, looking at planning in ways that we can engage our residents and capitalize on the cultural differences, the various demographics that we have in our community through our actions in there. Some of the things that we've been working with, like with the Parks Department, they do a lot of different types of activities and community events in there. By referencing our comprehensive plan, they can go to the council saying, this is what the community wanted. They wanted these engaging activities and use that as a ways to get funding for having these type of improvements. For us, we look and we try to cultivate specific type of users. While we can't tell someone who can move in there, but we have our ordinances kind of set up to encourage, like the small mom and pop type of development. So you'll see, I won't take credit on this, but like if you see what's going on in U City, which I really like, and it's right next door, but it's a lot of national box type of development. And then what you see coming here, it's either smaller shops or more first entry into the region type of thing in there. But you still have to have some of those chains to make everything work in there. So you'll have like a Domos, but then you'll also have a Jimmy John's, so we try to integrate all those, and we try to encourage a lot of, entry businesses into our community and along the corridor.
Which makes it more unique, kind of like.
Correct. It continues to feed off on that aspect of it. And then we have various codes in our municipal that you assist us and also kind of oversee with us. And some of those are like the zoning code, the subdivision code, flood code, and things of that nature. I won't go into those all specifically, and over time you'll get accustomed to that. But we have we have quite a bit of our own pie in the overall municipal code that the council's entrusted in us kind of overseeing and recommending changes as we go through. When somebody is going to make an improvement on their property, there's a determination whether they have to go through a commission or if it could be administratively approved. So if you were going to build a shed on your property, it's 120 square feet. All you have to do is come into City Hall, apply for your application, and it gets reviewed and issued administratively. If you're going to build a detached garage on your property, we look at the square footage, and odds are you may have to come through this board to get it reviewed before that permit can be issued. And we do what we call community design reviews, site plan reviews. And then there's two other type of reviews that we kind of oversee: special permits and concept stormwater management plans. Community design review is, again, a byproduct of the old community design review board. It establishes what our aesthetic standards are, and I'll get to them in a little bit more detail. Site plan review is when we look at what impacts that site will have upon its surroundings. And then we have stormwater reviews, and then which is looking at the stormwater and its impacts. And then special permits, when those are where you have a use that's not ideal for a specific location, but it is permitted and requires the council to also approve and act on that. An example would be a child daycare, typically not all over the place. Typically they come to the commission for a recommendation, and then they have to go to the council for their final approval. The reason we look at that differently than if somebody was opening a retail shop or an office is that there are other agencies that have licensing requirements. There are other things that they have to be concerned about in the building codes and also for our public services in there. So they get a, like I'll call it like a more thorough review in the process as opposed to if somebody was building the garage or the shed or putting in a tenant. When somebody has an existing building and an occupant is just coming in, 90% of the time they don't have to go through this commission. There are some tenants that do. Again, a liquor store would have to come through this commission. A daycare store would have to come through this commission. So you may see like, well, how did that business open? And it's like, well, the building was already there and they were permitted type of a user. When Firestone came in, they had to come through the commission, one, both for the building to be built, and then two, for authorization to have a auto service at that corner in there. Other things the commission kind of looks at are subdivision regulations, sign regulations, and then it's only happened twice since I've been here, and this is my 22nd year. You also serve as a board of building appeals. So if somebody was appealing a section of the building code, I would have to assemble this group to serve as the like kind of a jury to allow any exemptions on that, which is kind of unique because most of the times the building code calls it out for specific type of backgrounds and those. So now in reviews, community design review is the one that you do most. Most people, when they come in, are always going to be required to do a community design review, and that's really an aesthetic review. And that could get pretty arbitrary. Something I may like the color yellow and Rob may like the color purple, and we just disagree. We agree to disagree that that's our favorite color in there. So that in order to try to streamline the process on there, we adopted some guidelines in there that identify, I think there's 11 design principles that we give some guidance to applicants, developers, contractors and such to kind of look at when they submit their applications before us. When they do that, our staff kind of goes through and conducts the review and then makes sure that the commission is informed that, hey, according to the roofing components, there's something unique here in there. And then we ask, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not okay. It's just we're supposed to bring it to your attention in there. And you can see the various components: massing, roofs, garages, elevation, articulation, materials. The way we assess compliance with those is based on the illustrations that are in the guidelines. And then second is through the history of the commission. So the commission has been approving something that, let's say for an example, one or more critical one, something with less brick, less than 50% brick. We're kind of like noting the commission, this is less than 50% brick, but we've approved several of these in the past, and it could be for a specific neighborhood or area. At the end of the day, it's a commission consensus of whether it complies or not. Now, the reason we made them guidelines as opposed to adopting them through an ordinance is that it gives it flexibility. Design is something hard to compress and put in there, and that's why I have 7 members to kind of develop a consensus. And it's really the applicant's role to try to, engage with you to justify why they did something different or why they felt it complied. And then ultimately it's up to the commission, to say, yes, I think they did enough, or no, that's not acceptable in there. In that process. So that's the big distinction regarding the guidelines. They're not required by code. It is really up to the commission in creating some type of consensus in there. Go ahead.
When did we establish those guidelines?
I believe it was 2006, and then we've done one update in 2017.
2017.
And I think it's due for another one.
Yeah.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking, especially in light of with the new strategic plans.
Correct.
The new items that we've kind of been focusing in on.
So then there's what we call site plan review. Not every application goes through site plan review. Reason somebody would go to site plan review is because there's a finding that maybe it is a buildable lot, but it's a little narrow, or it's in a unique area, and therefore, since it doesn't meet a specific criteria or standard, we ask the commission to look at it more closely to see if what they're doing impacts neighboring areas or the site itself. So like typically an ideal lot and a residential lot and all of that will be 100 feet wide, and your setbacks will be 12 feet. And as long as you build within those setbacks, you should be okay. I mean, the council has determined that as long as you're 12 feet from your neighboring property on the sides, that is acceptable. It's not for you to question or so. However, if the lot was 99 feet wide and we applied the setbacks, that means they get a reduction in their setbacks, and therefore it's no longer that 12 feet. And even if it was 11.9 feet, there could be an impact to the neighbor, that we have to be cognizant of. And we can require some consideration to, well, how is the drainage swell going to go through there if it's less than 12 feet? What about the windows? What about, the topography in there? So it widens the door to consider the impacts it may have on the surrounding property in there. Allows the commission to look at buffering, parking, traffic, noise, pedestrians, landscaping, signs, utilities, schools. And then there's a thing about public income and expenditures and similar considerations in there. But again, when you see something having a site plan review, is that you're now imposing a greater level of review on this. It's no longer about aesthetics. It is about the impact to its surrounding and to the inside of the lot. All right. And then lastly, we do have, again, a comprehensive plan. We just adopted an update in 2024. And what that's kind of like what you see up here, and the plan itself is our missions, is our mission statement, our goals and objectives for the next 20 years. And there we do have it online, but our vision is to be a vibrant and unique city that's strengthened by its diverse population, invigorated by its opportunities for community connection, and distinguished by its dynamic sense of place in there. And they're bold words, pretty broad, but they have a powerful impact. The bike trail down on by Oak Estates that extends to Dillman, the GRG trail that just got extended through Indian Meadows. I mean, those projects would not have happened if we didn't have this thing like community connection. I mean, we go back and we during the budget sessions, and we keep talking to the council. It's like this is what our community wants. And the way we developed this plan is that we had a whole bunch of community meetings and hearings to allow an opportunity for residents to chime in and to give us some direction of what they would like the community to be. So it is a very powerful document, and you guys are the stewards of that document. From staff on the professional side, we try to implement and forward to you what we feel that gets the goals of that document completed. But then you also too chime in and tell us or give us directions of things that you would like us to review and consider. And we look at it, is it within the realms of the document, and then move on from there. So that's my short review. Sorry for being long-winded, and again, these are all, some of these may be new things, but these are all things that we will continuously work on and address and talk about as we go through various reviews and approvals. Okay.
Thank you,
Question?
Carlos.
All right.
That was great. Does anybody have any questions for Carlos?
I was just curious, who is our architectural or construction document planner reviewer right now? Who signs off on all the construction documents?
There'll be two points. So I have 3 building inspectors in there that are staff at a staff level. In there, I kind of separated them where we have a senior plan reviewer. His name's Scott Wagner. He's with the building division, and then a commercial inspector who's Mike Hostetter in there, and then a residential plan reviewer who's inspector who's Joseph Van Haag in there. They work administratively, through the city. Now, if the question was in regarding to the commission, in there we have Mr. Spiegelglass. He's got some construction background in there, and then we know you have some design background in there. We
I
don't
was just
hold you.
curious who, if the person reviewing plans is also part of the.
No.
So that's it.
No.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, anyone else? If not, then we'll go on to Stephanie.
Okay, so before I get into specific questions or topics, Carlos has already kind of gone over various functions for the PCDC, and he talked about zoning review, community design, site plan review, special permits, and that kind of thing. I'm gonna take you up a little bit higher to a 30,000-foot overview and talk about your 2 levels of authority when you're reviewing these things, and these apply to all of these different categories of review. You're going to actually exercise two different types of authority. The first one is legislative. And so that is when you are creating laws. When you recommend to the city council a possible text amendment, such as the tree ordinance, or when you change the boundaries of a zoning district, when you do rezoning, or, change any of the regulations, you are acting legislatively. You're the legislative, part of the legislative branch of government. So that means that you have the most discretion that anybody can possibly have, because you are creating laws. You are not administering the laws that are already on the books. So that's legislative. Everything else is going to fall under administrative. When you apply the laws that are already passed to a specific application, then you are acting administratively. And it's very important. When you're acting administratively, you don't have as much leeway as you do when you're acting legislatively. And let me go back to legislative for a moment. So when you are acting legislatively, you have a broad discretion. And anyone who challenges a legislative action must show that it was so arbitrary, so unreasonable, to the court. When you walk into the courtroom, if someone challenges a legislative action, you've already won because you're presumed to be correct. That doesn't happen with administrative. When you are applying the law that already exists to a specific application, administratively, you have to apply the standards that you have in the code, and you have to make a determination. If you, let's say that a subdivision plat or a request for a special permit comes to you, and you apply the law that exists, the ordinance, to that petition. If it doesn't meet the standards that are set forth, then it's non-compliant. You don't have discretion to approve it anyway. But if it meets all of those standards, and you're able to show that it meets all of those standards and requirements, you are obligated to approve it. And as we go through some of the questions, I do have a specific case out of Kansas City to illustrate that point. And in fact, I might as well just go ahead and mention it. In Kansas City, a developer brought forth a subdivision plat. That's administrative. The Plan Commission didn't like it. They didn't like the development. The city council didn't like the development. They did not want to approve this thing. But the subdivision plat complied with all of the ordinances that were on the books. So it went to the Plan Commission. They tabled it a couple of times. It went a couple of months. Finally, they denied it. It went up to the city council. The city planner was saying, this complies with ordinance, you must approve it. The city attorney was saying, this complies with ordinance and you must approve it. Well, city council denied it. That delayed the development. The developer sued the city, and in just damages, without attorney's fees, it was $175,000 just in damages for the delay that the denial caused. So when you're acting administratively with special permits, with community design, with site plan review, that kind of thing, you're acting administratively, you're going to have to show this complies with all of our standards, all of our guidelines, all of the ordinance requirements, or it does not, and how it does not, in order to justify your decision. And then, so I did want to stress that you're going to hear that a couple times tonight when just answering these questions. Now, did you want to just go straight into the questions that you had prepared? Okay. So, on the first page of the kind of the outline for the workshop discussion, Carlos outlined, the different types of review that you have, and then he did raise the issue of, okay, so what if there's a conflict between, let's say, your guidelines and the ordinance, or different ordinance provisions, which does happen sometimes. And so, if there's a conflict, you actually have a provision in your zoning code that says where this zoning chapter is more stringent than, let's say, other ordinances. Let's say that you have something in your nuisance code that talks about nuisances or something like that. And the zoning code has a similar provision, and it's more strict than the other chapter. then the more strict provision applies. So if there is a difference or if there's a conflict between two different regulations, then under that, when it comes to zoning regulations, if it's more strict, then that applies. Also, there are various rules of statutory construction that we use. So when we go to interpret a statute or an ordinance, and it's not exactly clear, it might be a little bit vague, we use various rules of statutory construction. And one of them says that when you have two conflicting provisions or that appear to conflict with each other, then you look at if one is more specific than the other one. So one is more general and one is more specific, then the specific one applies. So let's say that you have just a general height requirement, and it says 35 feet. But for houses, of a particular construction, if it is 20 feet, yes, those two things are not exactly aligned, but one is more specific, the second one. So then that one would apply. And by the way, the conflict provision in your zoning code is 400-1820. Carlos wanted me to talk a little bit about the guidelines and precedent. So let's just talk about the guidelines. You actually have a provision in your zoning code that says that approval consistent with the community design guidelines is required. So it's got to come to you. The guidelines are not mandatory on an applicant. So where it might say you need to do a roof step back, on, part of the house in order to make it more consistent with the character of the neighborhood and the scale more consistent with the neighborhood. It's not requiring them to come to you for a step back, but that's what is that's something that you need to review. And if that is appropriate in order to bring it down to the scale and to the mass of the neighborhood and make it more consistent with the character of the community or the neighborhood, then you can require that. It's not the code saying developers must come in with an automatic step back, but it's something that you need to look at when you're looking at whether this particular construction is compatible with the neighborhood. Does it set precedent? Yes.
So, but if it met all the, the regulations or whatever, we have listed there, but we're now into guidelines and we don't like it and they flat out refuse,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay for us to still deny?
Well, and what I think is that if you have a list of reasons about why this would not be consistent with the character of the neighborhood, I think that you can.
Gotcha.
That you can recommend denial. You've got to be able to articulate every single guideline, every single ordinance requirement that that they don't meet in order to do that. You can't just say we don't like it, or you must show that, okay, so the houses next to you are between this height and this height. This would be way beyond the scale and the mass. It doesn't have any mitigating factors such as the roof step backs, the roof pitch and all of that. So you've got to be able to articulate it. You can't just say, well, this doesn't really fit in with the character of the neighborhood. You've got to have specific reasons. Now, if your code says you can have a house that is so many feet high, and the guidelines are saying, well, you've got to fit in with the character of the neighborhood, you've got to kind of do this balancing act and say, okay, even though you might be allowed this height, does it really fit in with the character of the neighborhood? And it's that phrase about, and I don't remember the exact language, but there's a phrase in there and it's repeated in the code several times. And I think what it's trying to do, the intent of the city council in passing it in the first place was to ensure that, that the character of the individual neighborhoods are kept pretty much the same, and you don't just have, one house or one land use dominating all the rest.
Great.
Now, does that set it? Oh, go ahead.
I just, a couple of questions. Who is, because I know we recently denied a project. And we had lots of discussion, but we did not articulate exactly those things. It's this, or it's this, or it's this. And what if they meet all the specifics of a guideline, height requirement, setback, whatever those are, and we still deny it under the guise of it doesn't fit with the community, community or its surrounding uses. So one, who is actually articulating and where does it show up in the record? Would
Okay,
be-
well, so the members should be articulating that in their discussion. With administrative decisions, because you're acting administratively, you're applying the guidelines and the ordinance to a specific application. So the more you say in support of your decision, the more reasons you articulate, the better. And when the staff comes to you with the staff report, and by the way, you are so lucky because you have professional staff. There's a lot of cities that do not have a planner on board, especially a planner with so many years of experience. You have cities that don't have a city administrator, city manager. So you are so lucky. So you should rely on them. And it's key to be able to, to say, well, I relied on the expertise of our consultants. But there's going to be some, I'm sure, in the staff report about that. And in fact, your community design guidelines and your ordinance even talks about that. If it comes to the city and it clearly meets the guidelines, then, some approval is already done at that point. So I'm sure that some of those reasons are going to be articulated in the staff report or by staff. During the discussion, it's important with administrative actions to state, well, I don't think it meets this criteria and here's why. And, here's the house next door and the average, height of the houses in the neighborhood is this, and this is this, it's like double that. And there's no mitigating, design features of the house. So I think it's important that as you're having this discussion, that you articulate the reasons that you're looking at. And so, because I think that if you said, well, it appears to meet these criteria, but it just doesn't seem to fit in my mind, then I think that that's going to get you into some trouble.
I think we do a pretty good job with our discussions.
Well, the staff reports are very, very helpful, but I was just curious because sometimes we talk, but we don't necessarily say under
Right.
2.1 and 2.4 and 2.7, these were not met.
Yeah, you can be a little bit more general than that. So you don't need to cite to the specific guideline or to the specific ordinance, but I would talk about the topic so that the context or the concern can certainly be interpreted from that.
Have you ever listened to one of our sessions or,
I've not.
I would be
no.
curious just to see if we're doing an adequate job.
But one thing that I wonder related to that is that I think it's pretty common that one member will speak up and articulate their reasoning and will convince, or other people will agree, but we will not come out and say no for the reasons that Petrie
Yeah.
stated or whatever. So I'm wondering,
Uh.
is that because obviously we usually do, but we don't always all vote the same, and maybe not for the same reasons. So if we're trying to articulate our reasoning to create a clean record to show later, does everybody that votes no usually need to even just say no for the reasons that Tim said? Or
Yeah.
is one person
So
doing
if
it?
I were going to defend a decision like this, I would look at, and I've used the minutes, and if there's a recording of the meeting, use the recording, and then you can kind of pick up just the general, nature of the discussion, and you can pick up the reasoning from there. Plus, the staff report is part of the record, and so that's going to, I think that that's going to give everybody kind of a good idea of where it went.
Okay.
So about precedent and the guidelines. The guidelines really focus on the neighborhood and being consistent. And you have different neighborhoods. You have a very, very diverse set of, architecture and neighborhoods and things like that. So allowing a particular construction type in one neighborhood is not going to set a precedent for another neighborhood because you really have to look at that individual character. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. However, once you start making these decisions, and especially under the guidelines in one particular neighborhood, then that could affect decisions in the future in that same area. Special land use permits, which are conditional uses. They are,
So
Yeah.
can we go back to that precedence for a second? So
Mhm.
like, we had this two-story garage that we denied, but there's other two-story garages, let's say, on that street. But we're now starting to say, hey, we don't want these 2 stories, they're too big or whatever. Could
Mhm.
that get us in trouble?
well, what was the reason why you denied the 2-story? Was it bigger than the other ones or?
Bigger than the house, or it was going right next to the house where the level of it was almost where we said it needs to be, the parent house needs to be much bigger than the other one. And we
Yeah, and I think that
differentiate.
there's even a provision in your ordinance that talks about that the primary structure, that no accessory structure shall overshadow or be larger than the primary structure. So that's a reason right there. It's not going to say, you can't say every single 2-story, detached garage is now going to be allowed in that neighborhood because all the plans submitted to you for 2-story detached garages are all going to be different. I mean, some people might want to have, an accessory dwelling unit on the top floor and they might want to have high ceilings. And so the roof pitch may be different. It might, the lots are all going to be, or the lots, may be different sizes, that kind of thing. How close is it? So it doesn't mandate future decisions to approve. You've got to look at each individual application
Okay, that
on
makes
it.
sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that particular fact. And that takes me to conditional uses.
Can
And-
I ask one more question about precedents and?
Yeah, oh, yeah, okay.
Because a lot of
I
our
wanna speak
neighbors.
to that topic too.
Oh, you
Oh,
were, okay.
okay.
Well, I just want to talk about changing neighborhoods, tear
Mhm.
downs, homes that were originally built in, let's say, the 1960s, 70s, and now you have a new house coming in. But if you want to talk about that later, that's fine.
Oh, no, you go right ahead.
I'm just, because the new house is going to definitely be different than the character of that neighborhood,
Mhm.
so, but
And I'm sure that slowly the character is going to change over time as you get, more and more new construction in there. You've just got to make sure, and I think that your guidelines and your ordinances do a good job of saying, let's not, go forward 20 years into the future too fast.
right.
Yeah, let's do it slowly over time. And so, the established homes that are there, your established housing stock aren't, don't drown under all of the new construction. Let's move at a little bit slower pace. And I think that that was the goal. So you might have now, a 2-story house, but like your guidelines point out, it's important that you use mitigating factors like roof pitch, like architectural features and things like that to make them more consistent so that the 2-story doesn't all of a sudden seem way out of place with all the one ranch style around them.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure. Now, on still sticking with the idea of precedent on your special land use permits. So your code says there are certain uses that are just allowed by right, and so people can come in and say, I want to put in a retail store, on this street, and retail stores are allowed, so it goes in. It doesn't even come to you, unless there's exterior alterations or something like that. There are other conditional uses that say this use may not be appropriate for every single parcel in the district, but it might be appropriate for certain parcels. So that comes to you. You've got to decide whether that particular parcel is appropriate for that particular conditional use. And there are certain standards set out. And so if they have the right parking, the right access, the surrounding land uses, it's not going to be adverse to those, everything else works out, then you can grant that special land use permit. That does not mean that that sets a precedent for that particular special land use in the zoning district, because that you look at parcel by parcel, and not every parcel is going to be the same. They're going to be different lot sizes. They're going to have different access. They're going to have different topographical features, and they're going to have different surrounding land uses. So you look at that parcel by parcel so that you don't have to worry about setting a precedent if you approve a special land use permit for one parcel in the zoning district.
Can I chime in just on a little history background in there? The city used to have, or prior to 2000, a code requirement for special permits for fast drive-through restaurants, fast food restaurants. And they're required 120,000 square feet. It had been in the books in there. So when you compare Page Avenue and Olive Boulevard, you see what that does. Where you go on Page, every other block, you have a drive-through. You go on Olive, you had the Taco Bell, you have McDonald's, and I don't know if there's anything else. There used to be a Hardee's Burger Chef at one time. So you saw what the intent and the impact of that requirement was. Little history, 1985, this corner here where the McDonald's is, it's over 3 acres. When they were coming in, they were denied by the council, or recommended for denial, denied by the council. It went to court. Court said they can build the McDonald's. It goes through the permitting process in there. So that's a good example on how that got approved. The city had a criteria, 120,000 square feet. And you could see what it was doing, and it was doing its job if that was the intent. But once somebody met that, and was over, whether it was 121,000 square feet, it met that criteria, and it was required to be built.
Right, that's a really good example too, because when you're looking at that, the special land use permits, that's administrative. If it meets the criteria under the code, then you have to approve it. You don't really have the discretion to deny it. The next question was, are site plan reviews unique in that one lot may receive a unique set of conditions for approval or requirements for another? It's very possible, but I think it's going to be rare. Because your site plan requirements are pretty much set out in detail in the code. However, there's a couple that give you a little bit of discretion to interpret, okay, whether these comply with that particular, criteria, such as, if there was a site plan requirement that they have adequate access from a public road. Okay, given the land use is, one single small curb cut, is that adequate access for the traffic that's going to be generated by that particular land use, and things like that. So there might be certain things, certain conditions that you would apply to one particular land use, like a very large retail establishment, as opposed to other ones. But I think that that's going to be pretty rare, given that you have adequate requirements in your code. And Carlos, feel free to just jump in if, okay. Jumping to number 2, variances and variations. So I think that Carlos did a pretty good job of explaining the differences between variances and variations. Variances are by the Board of Adjustment, and they are from the strict provisions in your code, such as a setback. If your code says every house should be set back 5 feet from the property line, then it is 5 feet and no less. If there are practical difficulties with a particular lot, they can go to Board of Adjustment and get a variance, and the variance might say they can build 3 feet from the property line. And then your review is based on building 3 feet from the property line in accordance with the variance. Now, in some zoning codes, in several cities, they have allowed the Plan Commission to kind of vary certain requirements. You're probably not going to be varying setbacks unless it is a special provision to encourage, a certain kind of architectural character along a particular street, something like that. I know that a lot of cities have gone to, in particular, in creating kind of a downtown feel. They want the buildings to be closer to the street and the parking in the rear or on the side or something like that. They may allow a variation for that. I have seen some codes which say you can vary, let's say, lot coverage or other requirements in exchange for certain things, such as if you had an apartment, and I'm not saying that all of it has this, I'm just throwing this out as an example. If you have a developer coming in to put in an apartment complex, you could say maybe you're allowed a certain amount of height over the code if you create a green space with maybe a piece of public art or something like that. So there are variations built into your code that you're allowed to do. Those really aren't considered variances because they don't meet the same standards as a variance, but you're allowed to do them under your code. Legal issues that the commission should be aware of in making their decisions under the staff point 2. The very first thing is administrative versus legislative. You've got to look out if it meets the complaint, if it meets the requirements of your code and the guidelines. You don't have discretion to deny it. You've got to approve it, no matter how bad you think it is. If it meets all the requirements, then you have to approve it. Vice versa, if it doesn't meet the requirements, you don't have the right or you don't have the discretion to say, you know what, it doesn't meet the requirements, but we're going to approve it anyway because we really like this particular use. It might be a nonprofit, it might be something else that you really think is great, but if it doesn't meet the requirements, then then you can't move forward. And I'll give you an example. There is a pending matter that I'm working on, and the land use is great. It's going to serve an underserved group. It would just be wonderful, but they've got to work out a couple of things with their site plan in order to make it compliant with ordinance, and that's the trouble right now. It would be great to just go ahead and give them the okay, but they're not meeting the parking requirements right at the moment and some of the other requirements by code. We've already talked about precedent. So, especially with variations. So, if you give a particular developer a variation under your code, that doesn't necessarily create a precedent for you to be bound by later on. That is because every development is going to be different. Every parcel is going to be different. Those variations are written so that you're looking at the particular land use at that particular location. Let's move to number 3, public input. Or did you want to have anything else to add under number 2? Okay, so public input. I brought a list. I do these planning and zoning presentations quite a bit, so I just printed off a couple of things that I'd had before. So you have public input requirements under both state law and under ordinance. Under state law, you only need a public hearing or public comment to enact zoning regulations or to do text amendments, to enact land subdivision regulations, which is, if you're going to go out and plat a new subdivision or subdivide a parcel, and that plat then comes to you, you have to have a public hearing for that. Zoning and rezoning of property. So if someone comes in and says, I want to take my residential, property that is on Olive and change it to commercial, then that requires a public hearing. And then also your adoption of your comprehensive plan. Under state law, that's it. So your ordinance can require additional public hearings for additional issues. Like some cities, for their conditional use permits, they require a public hearing. For for other things, site plan, they might require a public hearing. So you look to state law and to ordinance, but state law only requires the 4 things. And if your ordinance does not require any other public hearings or public comments, for those issues where it's not required by state statute or by ordinance, you don't have to allow any public comments. If you want to allow public comments, either at the meeting on just general issues or on issues on the agenda, then you're creating a public forum and you're allowing the residents to speak. I think that the general idea behind allowing public hearings and public comments, even when they're not required, is the idea that you do want that community engagement. You do want that community input. And a lot of times they, the residents, especially those that are going to be impacted by this, have things that you may not have even thought about. And so I think that most cities go way beyond the statutory requirements in inviting public input. So when you allow for public comment and for public hearing, you have opened up a public forum, which means that you have to allow people to speak, but you can put time, place, and manner restrictions on that. So you can say, you can speak on any item on the agenda. Or you can say, you can speak on any item that pertains to land use in the city of Olivet. You can say that you can only speak for 3 minutes. Or change that to 5 minutes. You can put time, place, and manner restrictions on that. What you don't want to do, though, is place restrictions on public comment based on the content of the speech. And one thing that Carlos had brought up is it possible to say, well, we're only going to allow 3 speakers in favor of the application and 3 speakers in opposition to the application? I've never liked that. I think it gets too close, and this is just my opinion, but I think it gets too close to regulating the content of the speech. You've already opened a public forum on this particular application, and why are you limiting certain speakers based on whether they're for it or against it? So let's say that you already have 3 people who spoke in favor of it, and then you only have 1 person who spoke in opposition, but you're cutting off everybody else in the room that wanted to speak in favor of it. And so I've never really liked that idea. It would just be a suggestion, but I would suggest that you kind of stay away from that and put it more on, a time limit, if you wanted to limit speakers or if you wanted to limit the presentation. Also, those presenting probably would not be able to comply. So there are ways to allow the actual applicants or the presenters to have a little bit more time than other speakers. And while we're talking about public input, let's talk about the weight that you afford to particular testimony. So you're going to have, you might have several speakers and they come up. Not everybody, first of all, you don't have to give anybody weight. You just have to give them the opportunity to speak. And so once they speak, their comments could completely be out of left field and have no relevance whatsoever, to the criteria that you have to consider. And so you don't have to consider those. You don't have to respond to those. You don't have to say one way or the other whether you're going to rely on that or not. And then somebody could come in and make a really good point about traffic or stormwater or something like that, but somebody else, maybe lives a mile away and will never ever be in this area, in the subdivision. So you don't have to afford the same weight to everybody's comments. You take them who is most relevant. In the city of O'Fallon, I advise the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we do have somebody who attends every single Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and he does like to speak on every single application. And even though he might live 2 miles away and never go there, he still likes to speak about it, and so he'll come up and give comments. Okay, so is his weight or is his testimony afforded the same kind of weight as the next door neighbor? That's for the commissioners to decide, but if it were me, I would say no. And let's see.
I had a quick question on that. Just your advice on something. It's pretty common when someone gives public comments that they pose questions to the commission, and whether they're intending to be rhetorical or not, they will ask them. Do you think it's in our best interest to simply allow them to speak and say, thank you for your comments? Or do you think there's some value in engaging in any sort of dialogue with them?
So,
You can't say it depends.
oh, I'm not going to. I have a very specific answer for that. I think that you should take their comment and say thank you. You've given them their opportunity to speak, and they've done that. I'm going, and I don't think that there is anything to gain by engaging. And I will, there is a case out of Illinois that I cite to quite a bit. And it's, in fact, it's a recent case, and I believe it's still ongoing the last time I checked. So this was around 2022, 2023. The governing body of the city, there was a code enforcement issue, and the adult son of the elderly couple who got these code enforcement citations and came before the governing body. And he started making comments. Well, the mayor engaged with him, and they had this conversation that got a little heated at times. The mayor said a couple things that he probably shouldn't have. And everything that is said is used in this court, in this litigation. And beware, because everything that you say can be used in subsequent litigation. And so in this particular case, the city came in when the city was sued, and they alleged that the elderly couple was treated differently than other people. And they said it was because the governing body was biased, and some of the bias was demonstrated by this back and forth that occurred at this public meeting. And evidently it occurred at a couple different public meetings. And so the city came in, of course, and said, well, you know, we're allowed certain immunities because government, we do have certain immunities that we're entitled to. We have to allege them. But anyway, so the city made this motion, and the judge issued this lengthy opinion, which is at some points humorous and then at some points very scary. But he denied the motion to dismiss, and he said, oh no, we're going to go forward. We're going to go through discovery. We're going to do all of this. And the judge actually at one point went through word by word the engagement between the speaker during public comments and the mayor and the board members. And he went through word by word, and he quoted them in this opinion, saying that, you know, you guys have shown a bias, you know, by certain things that you said. So I think that during public comments, I think it's important to listen and consider whatever is relevant. But it's not the point where you engage with people.
Out of curiosity,
You can ask questions,
Right.
but let's say if they say, well, my house is next door and I'm already experiencing, you know, stormwater problems, and this is going to make it worse, and then they just end it there. You could say, what kind of stormwater problems are you experiencing? Or, you know, be a little bit more thorough, you know, on that issue. And I don't think that that's going to be bad, but just this, you know, constant conversation back and forth and discussion, I don't think that there's anything productive in it. Yes.
but if they have a question about the application that's already been presented, but they just weren't paying attention or don't know, and we know that answer, sometimes I think that helps, you know, helps them understand.
Yeah, if it's something simple like that, I don't see a problem with that. If
Right.
they say, now, how many feet is the house away from the property boundary? And they just weren't paying attention during the staff report, you could have staff answer, or you could say, oh, it's 5 feet.
Right.
Yeah,
But don't engage in a back and forth debate.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Would
Oh, sorry.
would you distinguish that from when a petitioner is speaking? And I think a common thing that happens is we start talking and give some comments, and they say, well, I want to ask you about this because such and such. Like, should we be engaging in a dialogue with the petitioner as a way to guide them towards an approval, or is that also dangerous territory to be in?
Well, I think that I think absolutely you're going to have to ask them questions. And but if you are trying to guide them toward an approval of how to fix their plan, what you might suggest instead of going back and forth with them and saying, well, this current plan doesn't comply with the ordinance or the guidelines because of this. Would you like a chance to revise your plan? And what they should be doing is coming in and talking to staff beforehand, or if the commission has pointed out, you know, certain deficiencies in a in a plan, then they should be saying, okay, let us go back to the drawing board, fix this, and then get with staff and then come back in.
Yeah, because that's a common tension where I think petitioners are looking at us and basically saying like, just tell me what you want and I'll do it. But we are reticent to, I mean, I know Rob has said this many times, like, it's not our job to
To
design your building for you.
Mhm.
So
We-
I
we-
assume that's the right approach, is just,
We do engage in a little bit of negotiating, you know, if there's a particular side of the house that doesn't have any articulation. Where, you know, we make some suggestions and it kind of goes back and forth. It does get into that funny,
it does.
you know.
We try to walk that line between
Right.
saying like, this is our area of concern and this is the type of thing we would like to see, but we're not going to specifically say it
That-
needs to be.
Right, right. And I've had one member of a plan commission, where there was disagreement on the plan commission, you know, on a particular architectural feature. And one person said, well, I just love it. This actually makes me feel happy. And he goes, but I'm just one person up here. And so everybody kind of had their own opinion. And they said, well, we're concerned about this. You know, maybe, you know, if we saw this, we would be more comfortable with it, you know, and then let them go back, decide what they want, and then come back.
Okay, go.
I have a question. So what about when the petitioner and the public comments go back and forth?
Well, that's inappropriate.
So we'll have a public comment come up and ask a question or talk about something, then the petitioner will come back up
Mhm.
and answer those questions or a rebuttal, let's say it, and then sometimes it will go back and forth a little bit.
That doesn't happen much, but
Much.
I do
That's-
remember when I laughed that.
Yeah, so the presenter should always, and the speaker, they should always be addressing the commission. It's not the time for them to go back into this conversation among them. They should always be focused on the commission, and they should always be engaging the commission and not each other. Sometimes the presenter will make their presentation and then somebody will come up and give, you know, give comments. I'm concerned about stormwater. I'm concerned about this. A lot of times the chairman will ask the presenter to come back up and respond to some of the concerns. They should be addressing those to the commission, and nobody else from the audience should be speaking at that moment. And then the general rules of public comment. So if you've already given your 3 minutes, you don't come back up. Or you know, if there is some type of rule that you can only speak once and you get a total of 3 minutes and that's it, then they can't. They certainly can't speak from the back of the room. The only time that they can engage is from the podium, in accordance with the rules, and acknowledgement from the chair that, you know, that this is their time to speak.
Do we, I don't know, Carlos, do we have a specific rule about you're only allowed to speak once or anything like? I'm wondering if that would be helpful to avoid a situation where the petitioner comes up and says something, next person comes up and then the petitioner wants to come back and rebut and they try and go back and forth and they say, I just have one more thing I need to say. Like, do we have a rule where we can say, hey, listen, folks, this is.
One shot only.
Well, yeah, or yeah.
I think we followed kind of the policies that the council has put into place, that they have written policies regarding the public comments in there. I don't think from the commission side, and it may be something worth us adopting some policies and procedures for the commission meetings, so they you know,
Yeah.
And therefore current and future commissions, you know, that they have something to back them up in terms of how if some conduct like that was set or done, that they're just following what
think it-
they've adopted.
I think it also depends on it. Does this make it more productive
Right.
to have that back and forth? If all of a sudden there's, you know, a discussion and it puts more question into things, where they're arguing back and forth, you know, or saying different things, sometimes just getting a little more clarity, even though it requires them to come back again, I think is helpful, because ultimately we can make our decision based on that.
And I do think you can do that, and that's perfectly fine. I just think that it shouldn't be from the back of the room, but if they want to say, I have further comment, and if you want to acknowledge them, I don't think that they should just barge in and just start yelling out things from you know, the audience. But if you want to, you know, bring them up and have them, you know, make their comments to the commission at the podium, then that's perfectly fine.
Dawn's really good at making sure.
I use force accountants.
Okay.
One of the things that happened, I thought was kind of unusual, is we had one semi-contentious issue, and somebody who was speaking from the public actually brought their own documents to contradict the applicant. Like,
Mhm.
I think, I don't know, it was like square footage or something. It was some issue.
Renderings.
Renderings, had their own renderings to show why we shouldn't approve it. And my first reaction was, no, that's not in my packet. I'm not considering that. I don't know
Mhm.
who you are, and I don't know if you know what you're doing. And I'm just curious if there is a procedure for that, where somebody might bring something that is totally legitimate, and that may have been legitimate in that circumstance, but it feels like you can have comment, but that doesn't mean we get a dictionary or an encyclopedia of your knowledge.
Mhm.
I mean, is there a distinction there along the way?
Well, a lot of commissions will go ahead if the exhibits are relevant. I mean, there is a way to include those into the record. And so just like some people will send in an email with maybe an attachment or a photograph. You know, if they're arguing about stormwater, they might take a picture of the stormwater issues that are in existence right now. And so that goes into the record. So you know, there are many commissions who will take those documents, but you're not you know, and put them into the record. But there's not a requirement that you consider them. There's not a requirement that you give them any weight. You know, it's if someone gives a picture of stormwater issues that are right now, you know, that might be relevant, you know, and especially with an applicant saying, well, this is how I'm curing or reducing the stormwater that is being run off right now. So, and that really just goes to your rules of procedure. But
It feels like
Mhm.
that sort of information should have been funneled through staff and then come to us that way,
Yeah.
not necessarily, you know, oh, here.
And what you could do is, because a lot of commissions will say that in lieu of, or if you don't want to appear at the meeting and give verbal comments, you can submit them in writing 24 hours in advance and you send them to staff. What you could say is that if you have any materials that you're going to want to present, those have to be presented to staff a certain number of days ahead of time. And then if they haven't submitted those, they can't just come into the meeting and say, oh, hey, I've got this. But that should be then publicized. Let's see. Oh, subdivision indenture. Shall we talk about those two really quick? I think we've addressed everything on the, oh, notice. We haven't addressed notice. So state law requires certain notice of certain things. Like if you're going to do a text amendment, you have to publish at least 15 days prior to the public hearing, right? Before you do a rezoning, you have to publish notice. There might be certain ordinance requirements that say you mail it out, or you post it at the property or something like that. You have to follow both ordinance requirements regarding notice and you have to follow state law requirements. But that's as far as it goes. If you want to do notice over and above those requirements, that's just a bonus. Like your ordinance might not provide for posting on the property, but then Carlos will go out and put a huge sign saying, hey, I've got a conditional use permit or a special land use permit application for this property and the public hearing will be there. That's just a bonus. What the court's going to look at if somebody challenges you on a decision and they feel that there wasn't sufficient notice given this, the court's going to look at state law requirements first and then your ordinance requirements to make sure you comply with those.
What about the reliability of the mail service? It seems to be not as reliable, you know,
Right.
nowadays.
Well, there are a couple statutes that still require notice by mail. And so, in order to comply, you still have to mail it. What I sometimes do is I go above and beyond that requirement. I still mail it because I can say I can submit an affidavit or I can assert to the court, I mailed it. But then, you know, you might do email, you might post it on the website, you might, you know, do certified mail in addition to regular mail. Make sure that if it says mail, make sure you still mail it, but you can consider alternatives that are above and beyond that. You're not required to, but you can consider them.
It's not like we can hand out, 100 email letters by certified. We just
Right.
don't have the budget for that.
Yeah.
So.
And you're very lucky because you have a website
Yeah.
that is very user friendly, at least in my opinion. And so you've got everything there. They can download the packet, they can download the plans, your comprehensive plan, your ordinances are all right there. So it's very easy to look at your website. You've got that, which is over and above statutory requirements. So.
Good.
So subdivision indentures. We have no role in enforcing or considering subdivision indentures. That's just another layer of requirements that are on certain lots within a subdivision. Subdivision indentures are actually a contract. When a person buys a lot in that subdivision, they are signing on to that contract between them and the enforcing body, which is a homeowners association, if they have a homeowners association. The city cannot enforce the indenture, and the city cannot really consider the subdivision indenture when making its decisions on a particular application, because you're looking at the criteria set forth in the ordinance and the guidelines adopted by the city council. And that's where your review, that's where your jurisdiction lies. Now, I will point out that there are a couple of cities that have done this. They, on a particular development, they might have a deed restriction enforceable by the city. So let's say that it's a special stormwater issue and the developer is going to be putting in a dry well or a holding tank or whatever that is, and he is obligated to maintain it, or they're obligated to maintain a detention basin or something like that. So the city wants a deed restriction recorded that the city is, if they fail to live up to their maintenance obligations for it, the city can enforce that. So the city can enforce those types of deed restrictions, but if it's just a typical homeowners association saying you shall only use the lots for residential purposes and you must use, 30% brick and all those types of things, those are enforceable by other bodies. We don't have the power to enforce those. So, and they shouldn't be part of the consideration.
Even if we don't have the power to enforce them, is it okay to suggest to the petitioner that they work out any of those issues prior to us approving them, or is it best to stay out of it completely and just review it on its face?
I think it's perfectly fine to suggest to them that nothing in your approval grants them an exemption from their subdivision indenture and their subdivision requirements. And in fact, there is even a provision in your zoning code that says just because we allow something, it doesn't abrogate, it doesn't cancel out that other indenture that might require something totally different. So it's certainly fine to suggest to them that they still have to comply with their HOA and they better, do that, but, or they better go to them and get their approval. But I wouldn't delay it too much, especially on administrative. I wouldn't delay it just on that basis.
Okay.
So my question then is, does like municipal code ordinances then supersede the HOA or
No.
no?
No,
Okay.
they don't, no. One is not more powerful than the other. It's, the landowner must, comply with both.
Okay.
So let's say that the ordinance is more strict than the subdivision indenture. Let's say the division indenture says, you can't have a fence, more than 5 feet into the front yard from the side of the house. But we say you can't have a fence at all in the front yard. They've got to comply with both, which means that they have to comply with the more strict provision, which is no fence in the front yard at all.
But to clarify though, when you say comply with both, if they don't comply with the city, then we have, legal action to take. If they don't comply with an HOA, then it has to go civil, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that was the key difference. I think we were always looking at is we recommend you go after this. We're not going to help you solve this issue. And we might we try not to mediate. Carlos doesn't like to do that in his spare time, but like if someone violates their HOA and their neighbors are upset, well, then they have to decide if they want to pony up the money and sue them. And that's may or may not happen, but it's not a legal issue at that. Well, it's a legal issue. It's not code enforcement issue.
It's not a code enforcement issue, exactly right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
that the city would be involved in.
Correct.
It would be a separate lawsuit between the HOA and the resident.
Yep.
Down in Clayton. Yep.
The other thing I like to make sure they get that resolved ahead of time so that when it comes to us, we're kind of the final.
But it
You
doesn't
know.
have to be.
I agree.
But it's a good idea.
But if it comes to us, we approve it and then the homeowners association wants more changes
Yeah.
and they change the look of it or change something.
Then it would have to come back to us,
Right.
right?
Yep.
But that's
Agreed.
why it's a little bit smoother if they can get it resolved
That's why I
ahead of
asked
time.
the question, because that's been our sort of
Yeah.
general policy is
Mm.
to say we
Yeah.
table it or recommend that you get that done first before you come to us. You don't have to come back.
Yeah,
another
and the
time.
best way, if you're going to table something, the best way to do it is by getting their consent and say, would you like to go to them and make sure that you don't have to change this before coming back to us? Because it's a lot more difficult to get our approval than it is theirs, and it takes longer to get our approval. And if they don't give you the consent to table it, I think it's fine to table it, but I wouldn't, at least once, I wouldn't do an extended delay, because then at that point, you're just pushing off the administrative decision and you're causing them more delay. When if they met all of our criteria, it should have been approved. So I wouldn't let the tabling go on for too long.
Makes sense.
Let's see. Actually, Carlos, on this, the code versus preference, I think you had a great response there.
I did not receive, I don't know if anybody else did. I never
Oh.
received this memo with the questions on.
Oh, I thought that was sent around.
I think it was.
It was on my email.
Was it?
Carlos had a reminder.
It was on the
I guess I didn't look at it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I've just been like,
Cause I looked at like the text that I got about the meeting and it wasn't there. And so I thought, am I missing something? I apologize. Thank you.
Petrie, I did the same thing.
We'll send it out tomorrow.
I didn't look at the attachment.
Or we can run some prints. If you can run some prints right away.
Don't feel, I can print it out at home.
Printed copy right now?
No, we can
No,
look,
no.
print it out at
No,
home too.
I can run it out.
I was glad Carlos is posting it online. That's,
No, it's very helpful and I'm just like,
yeah. So, and Carlos actually proposed an interesting question, and that is, you have different reviews. You have zoning review, community design, site plan review. They're all going to have their own separate set of criteria, right? So, Carlos said, could it comply with zoning review but not comply with community design review? And yes, that can happen. So you're looking at all of these. So let's say that an application comes to you that is subject to community design review, but it also has other zoning regulations like setbacks that are applicable. So you're looking at everything all at once. And while it might meet all the setbacks and certain requirements, it might not meet community design review. And then if it doesn't meet one criteria, then then you can deny it on that basis. And just remember that that your code says where zoning regulation conflicts with other ordinance or something like that, the more restrictive zoning regulation applies. And just like with the rule of statutory construction, if you have two competing regulations that seem to be inconsistent with one another, then the more specific it applies over the more general one. And then one thing that Carlos wanted me to address was if something is permitted by right, but it's not going to meet the zoning regulations, can will the property owner be then deprived of that? And the example that he threw out was a swimming pool. So yes, swimming pools are allowed in the residential zoning district, but if you have a very small lot and it's not gonna meet the setback, or a lot of cities have a limitation on impervious coverage, the amount of concrete that you have on the lot and all of that. If it's not going to meet those, then yes, maybe you don't get a swimming pool. They could go to the Board of Adjustment, possibly get a variance. Maybe the limitation on impervious coverage is subject to a variation that the Plan Commission can agree upon. And then they would have to come to you and show you how they meet all the standards for that variation. I've got a kind of a long list of questions, but it's getting kind of, I don't know how much time I have
No, I
left.
think the core ones were answered, and we'll send that out again.
Okay,
Tomorrow in there, but give the commission the opportunity if there were other questions.
awesome.
I think these were based on what we've kind of heard over time in there, and also sparked other questions in between, but here's your opportunity. And
I was gonna ask, and I'm sure this has come up, but do people in the committee have personal projects they brought to the table, and then when that happens, do you just stepped out of the way and allow the committee members to talk kind of with
That's a
you
great question.
when it becomes personal?
So there's actually state statutes that apply to Plan Commission members. And so if you have first of all, if you have a project coming forward, then, you have to step away. Whenever you have a conflict of interest, which I'll go into in just a moment, what I recommend, first of all, you cannot vote. And what I recommend is that you step away from the dais altogether. Let's say that your husband is an architect that is working on a particular project and they are presenting that to the Plan Commission. So that would present a conflict for you. So not only would you not vote, but what I've always suggested is to step away from the dais. Do not even participate in the discussion. You don't even want the appearance that you are exerting influence in any way. I don't want you to get into trouble for that kind of thing. So if you have your own petition, then I think that you should recuse yourself. The statute on conflicts of interest is set up so that if it financially benefits you or a member of your immediate family or a company that you're associated with, you don't want to take part in it. Also, there's a requirement that, let's say that you are an architect or an engineer. And so once you resign from the Plan Commission, there's a 1-year requirement where you can't come back to this Plan Commission and advocate on behalf of a client, design a house and then come in and advocate for them. You have to wait a certain period of time, that 1 year. So not only would you not vote when you do have a conflict or when you have, an a real interest in something, but I would step away from the dais and say, I'm recusing myself, step away. You can go into the audience, you can go into the hallway, you can go into the back room. And then when that discussion is over, then you can come back out. Did you have anything else to say on that?
There'd be a couple of things that I would add. So for the most part, one of the three of us is probably going to work with you. And let's say if you were going to do a pool, we're going to probably work with you and go over the code and make sure that all that aspect is in there. And if it has to come to the commission, then yes, we would ask that you recuse yourself or so. In there, if your neighbor's building a pool and they know because you're their neighbor, they know you and they see that there's some advantage, I would be cautious and not participate in there. If it's a friend from your kid's school that lives way on the other side of town, I don't see that there's a financial benefit to you on how you make your decision. But I might be cautious too. If everybody's there on the commission, you may want to just step down. That way there's no personal influence or.
And while it's absolutely necessary to avoid a real conflict of interest, you also want to avoid just the appearance of one. And so while something might not be technical, you might feel that it just has the appearance of it. And so then you recuse yourself for that.
So
That's a really good question.
Got a full board. I don't want to lose. it. Just let me know. No.
Carlos, you gave me good advice too, because you just said, in a particular situation, can you be impartial? And I thought that was really good advice, because how do you gauge if it's a neighbor 3 doors down or 5 doors down? And you might be better friends with the person 5 doors down or at the end of the block. And I think that was very good advice, for me to kind of make that judgment.
But we also recognize it's a small community, and with the schools and everybody pretty much knows everybody for the most part.
Activities, yeah.
So
I have a question. Could there be any liability personally for being on this board?
So, usually, the cities will indemnify their officials, and they have insurance that, city employees and city officials are covered by that insurance as long as it wasn't something done in,
Delicious.
yeah, something that isn't, trying to think of a good example, but if you just totally went outside the scope of your authority and or did something, I mean, insurance is not going to cover an employee that, that takes funds or, something like that. But as long as you're acting reasonably, you're acting within the scope of your authority, the city is going to indemnify you. They're going to defend you. So let's say the developer felt like you guys delayed for too long or improperly denied a project, and they add the plan commission. Because you're an advisory body, usually they won't, but let's say that they did, then the city's going to offer you a defense, usually through the city's insurance company, and they're going to indemnify you. And I mentioned earlier that a lot of cities have certain kinds of immunities, and city officials and employees have certain kinds of immunities. If you are just acting as a decision maker on the plan commission, you're most likely going to be dismissed anyway, because you were just acting within the scope of your authority as a decision maker, and you're probably going to be dismissed anyway. Mhm.
What if you're contacted by a petitioner that lost their petition?
Oh, that was denied.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they might, I go back to, the less engagement, probably the better. And the less that is said, and in the event that they appeal that, I would hate to have any kind of statement, and they're probably going to exaggerate the statements for their own benefit. But so I would probably just say, I can't really talk to you about that. And especially if you decide to reapply a little bit later, change. I know that there's a provision in here that somebody who is denied, they can change their plan a little bit and then come back in. And so they're going to be coming back to you. You don't want to, they don't want to taint you for that review in the future. And I just think that the less engagement, the better.
Just following along that lines, if someone does approach you, should we tell everyone else so they're aware that we were approached?
yeah, and I've heard like where you enter it into record, or you would note, you want everybody to know that I was contacted by so and so, and we did discuss, some provisions of the ordinance. I hear that more like from zoning board of adjustment members,
Yeah.
than I would from commission members. But
What are the most common mistakes that commissions like us make that lead to litigation?
Wow. That's a great question.
Thank you.
I would say, denying something that should be administrative approval, um, uh, where it met most of the criteria. And, you know, the Creve Coeur recently was challenged on their decision to deny a CUP to Quick Trip, I believe it was. Yes. And so they denied the CUP, the conditional use permit. And then when it went to circuit court on appeal, the circuit court actually found against Creve Coeur. Now, the circuit court also said that because their decision was wrong, then they were ordering the city to issue the conditional use permit with the standards that had been recommended, or with the conditions that had been recommended by staff. A court can never do that. The court can find that your decision is wrong, that it's unreasonable. If they find that, then it has to come back to you for you guys to consider. But anyway, that went up on appeal, and Creve Coeur was able to show that, because remember, it's administrative, they were able to show it didn't meet the criteria in these ordinances and blah, 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 blah. And the court, when it finally found in favor of Creve Coeur, said it didn't comply with this little section, and they were actually able to cite to the provision of the code. And so they did a really good job with the record. Another thing, if the record is really poor and it's not clear as to why the plan was denied, or why it didn't meet the criteria, the standards in the ordinance, that's very difficult to do on administrative, because legislative, you cannot say a word, and you go in and the court is only looking to see if the law that you created is reasonable. And you don't even have to say a word. But with administrative, you have to create a record, because the court is only looking at the record to see if that was a reasonable regulation, that it was consistent with the law, it was based on the ordinance, and all of that. So you've got to build that record. With legislative, you're not going to have a record, but with administrative, you do, and you need a pretty strong one.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Brian, did you have one? Jack, Dawn?
Amazing job. You were all.
Thank
No,
you.
greatly appreciated.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
So. all right. So Chairman, we have a couple of things to kind of, given that we got 2 new members and we got several members that are been less than a year, to kind of, if we can kind of go over and talk about the staff reports and then just have some general discussion. Again, I do recognize the tree ordinance being important, but we don't have anything for the August 7th meeting, and we can focus on that. So Jack's going to talk about the staff reports. So you are aware of what we do, not just the staff report, but what happens in the background as these petitions come in, and what are the analyses that are going on. And I'll give you. May have to. Get you. Yep. Yeah.
All right, good evening, Commission. So before you tonight, we're going to do an introduction of the PCDC staff review. So this is kind of what I will go through when a petition comes in. So a while ago, I want to say a few months ago, we brought a text amendment before you guys regarding the timeline for those or for the staff reviews. So when a petition comes in, it can come in at any time. We used to have a deadline, so you had to meet these deadlines to make it to these certain dates for these meetings. As a result of that text amendment, we removed the deadline. So now you can submit the petition, at any time you feel that you're ready to submit. So first you would take the petition in, then I have 15 days to review that submission based off of the minimum submission requirements that we have, as well as if the plan set is determined as complete. So that it's kind of small right there on the screen, but that's everything that we're looking for within a complete plan set. So we're going to be looking to see if they have their application, if they've paid their review fee, if they have the site improvement plan, and if that site improvement plan is an existing improvement plan, as well as the proposed improvements, if it has all of the setback information, if we have the site cross sections to scale, if there's a concept stormwater management plan, and then we go into the architectural plans, streetscape plans, any respective buildings specifications. I know that sometimes when you guys, we get the decks and different stuff that comes in, they'll just submit their specs along with that. It's not really a requirement for your guys' review, but it's just something that we put in your packets just because it was submitted along with the PCDC petition, as well as any streetscape elevations. And then we go into the project report or project summary, as well as the tree protection plan and landscape plan. So I will go through that on that little Excel sheet. There's like a key to the right. So for me personally, I'll go through and I'll put a check mark, a yellow X if it's something that, they kind of addressed, but then we need additional material, and then a red X if they have not submitted that. As a result of that, I will also go through, I'll come back to this slide in 1 second, but, oh, Carlos, is that what I click right here? Yes. Okay, cool. All right. So this is like this is what we're looking for with the minimum submission requirements. So this is an example of stuff that had come in. This is solely related to architectural plans, but there are these minimum submission requirements that are built out in all of the conditions. So for existing site conditions, we have a whole section of minimum submission requirements we're looking for the petitioner to submit. Again, not all of these minimum submission requirements are necessary for every single petition that comes in. For instance, if you have a rear addition, we're not going to ask for streetscape plans if you can't see that rear addition from the street. So there's certain components that are not necessary. However, the commission does hold the right to ask for that material. If there's something that's presented, say we notify the petitioner that they have not provided an arborist report. The petitioner doesn't seem that it's reasonable. You guys do have the authority to request an arborist report if you seem fit that you would like that information. As a result of that complete plan set, all of the petitioners are also informed based off on their submission deficiencies. So they're sent through that review. Everything here, whether or not they've included it within their complete plan set, and whether or not, I'm going way too far, or whether or not they've addressed all of their minimum submission requirements. And the deficiencies are noted when you guys get your staff reports. They're noted on the staff report. And then we also have a section on that staff report that is primarily focused on community design review. So for the new commissioners, you'll see your first staff report when we get a petition item, but the petition, it'll be more general information, your conditions and approval and a motion, and then more of the beef and context of the petition is farther in the staff report, but it's broken down by site plan review, concept stormwater management review, and community design review, as well as we have a comprehensive plan aspect of how it, can relate to the comprehensive plan. Just once those 15 days are up, I will send an email to them with everything noting their deficiencies. And from that email that I send, that starts another timeline of 30 days. So they have 30 days to submit their revisions to staff. If they fail to do that, their petition application for the commission is voided. So we take that 30 days into account. They try. Usually we do get them within the 30 days. We haven't really had any issues with that, but it does sometimes get pretty close to the 30th day. If we get that application, the revisions all in by those 30 days, the rule is that that petitioner will be placed on a meeting within the 30 days of us receiving that. So if I sent their comments and all they needed to do was submit an arborist report, they give me that arborist report the next day, then they're guaranteed to be on a meeting within 30 days of us receiving that revision. So then once staff has received the revisions, the petitioner will be placed on that agenda or on the agenda for the meeting within 30 days of the receipt. And then from there, we will take the petition before the commission. Just some additional information. We do like a calculation sheet. This is all for site plan review. So this is how we look for all of our site coverage, lot coverage. There's additional portions of this Excel form, I didn't screenshot everything on this page, but like we take the building setbacks into account. Carlos had this all built out prior to me coming here, but he has sections on there related to neighboring homes, the years of what's been, in the subdivision and everything. So we build out this calculation sheet. So this is just something internally with staff, but we will do that to make sure that it hits all of the necessary code requirements. Also, the site plan information sheet is something that I'll go through. This is not really more minimum submission requirements, but this is to make sure that they have all of this, site plan improvement data on their submission. And that's something that you guys see a lot actually coming in on the site plans. It's usually a table on the first page that says lot info. And they usually kind of take this format that we already have, or we're following the format that most, petitioners will provide on the site plans. But we go through that. Yes, sir.
Petitioners see this stuff?
Yeah,
Is there a
so
packet of this?
so this is actually all in their application for the PCDC. So it's like, I want to say like, it's a pretty lengthy application, but we have all of the minimum submission requirements are there. And then all of this information is there. So all of these different pages in the real Excel document I probably have like, this is that 6? I can't tell. I think it's 6. Yeah, page 6 of what I'm looking for. But everything in this thing all has their own requirements that I go through to make sure that everything's involved in the petition.
But after you've done your review, you don't give them this, do you?
No, once I do my review, they get the screenshots of what they're deficient in.
Okay.
So for instance, this was sent to the petitioner at the time of what they had and what they were not providing. But then there's certain components, for instance, you can see here in terms of community design, they provided some sort of information, but then they didn't provide, what type of material they were using on the roof. So I'll send back to them. I'll say, hey, you started addressing this comment, but can you please impose the materials onto the plan?
So we do tell them in advance of the meeting what
Yeah.
they are deficient of, I think.
Yeah.
So it is communicated.
Yeah.
And it's communicated prior to the 30 days that they have to do those revisions.
Makes sense.
And that was something that we had while we were starting to build out this process. It's some comments that we got from some petitioners regarding that, because originally it was the 15-day period to just check if they have the whole complete plan set. And then they would come back and I would send them their revision comments, and sometimes we would get some, comments back of why weren't these addressed, earlier. That would have given us more time. So now inside of that 15 days, we've incorporated to do the complete plan set as well as my, preliminary review of everything that's been submitted. But then of course, if the petitioner chooses to be deficient in something, for instance, they don't want to submit an arborist report, and we've notified them multiple times that they have to submit an arborist report, then it comes down to whether the commission would actually like to see that information, because staff has done, the side of talking to them and informing them about the necessary components of their submission.
This is the thing that is really confusing to me, and that is, if they have not submitted the things that they're required to submit, why are we even looking at it until they do it? Until they give you everything that you are asking for? Why are we seeing something that shows the deficiencies? Wait a minute, until the deficiencies are corrected, why are we even looking at it?
If I can answer that, because there's a couple of things. By code, a site plan, there's specific things that are required to be submitted for a site plan review or a community design review. This site plan review gets confusing because we often talk about a document being a site plan, but there's also a term called site plan review. And when you go through site plan review, you're supposed to submit a site plan, the document, or what we probably is better references like the improvement plans. And the code says you submit improvement plans, building plans. It may say project report and a cross section, because it's in the code and it's very generalized. So maybe that's not the right term. Then in the application, we have a site plan consists of an existing survey, a proposed survey, these calculations, these improvements. They're not specifically codified in the code as the term site plan or improvement plans. They're like a handout that this is what is intended or this is what is met in there. So they're not really, they're tied to the code, but they're not called out in the code. So the way we've always looked, or the process that we've looked at it has been, I don't want to say it is subjective, but we're trying to define what we intend as the code site improvement plans in there, and guiding them that this is what would compose that. But if somebody doesn't want to provide it in that process, the way I see it, if it's not specifically called out in the code, that is their choice. I need to make sure that they're aware, and then also in the report, make sure that the commission is aware, like the arborist report, that an arborist report was not submitted
So
in there.
what would happen is we would see it in the report that this has not been submitted, and the motion that we would make would be, we approve it on the condition that staff gets that particular item.
Not necessarily so. What would generally happen is we would make sure the commission's informed. We'd make sure also the petitioner is informed. And we make sure that the petitioner is aware that that might be a means for the commission to table, defer, or deny. And we leave that up to them. And what happens though, and what we're trying to improve, because I know that there's been, so we may have like one of the items that's in the application component is that you have to provide the grade elevation at all four corners of the house. So an application comes in, they submit it to Jack, and they had the elevation on three corners of the house in there. We note it to the applicant, but we would not prohibit them from coming to the commission. But we were going to make sure that the commission's aware, because it may not make a substantial difference of whether it was truly necessary or not. We had one application recently where the gentleman had two trees, and the two trees were going to be removed in there. We brought it to the commission's attention, and it was like, why, and he noted, is like, do I have to get an arborist report? There's only two trees, and I'm already going to remove those two trees. And the commission was aware, it got approved, but we made sure you as a body were aware of that. And the positioning of those trees was just in a bad place in there. One was under the power lines, the other one was by the utilities in the street. And again, it could have been like, I could have made them submit the arborist report for the purposes that says you got to submit the arborist report, or just, in there. Now, under the new draft, it is going to be a requirement, and I won't have that same flexibility. I'll have more flexibility in terms of whether he called out the specific tree name or so, but it will be required that they submit an arborist report. Does that kind of, and as far as everything that in there, it's difficult for us. The way we kind of look at it too is like, when we give them the application packet, I'll call it a packet. Like, if you give me everything that's in this packet, there should be no reason that any of the commission members should ask for something more. And we might miss something that was unique, but it's like, if you have everything in here, everything necessary to do a thorough evaluation should be sufficient in there. But if you miss here and here, I'll bring it to your attention. We'll note it in the report if we feel like this is important. We asked them, they haven't provided, in there. So those sometimes you won't see. They'll argue with us through the process, and then in the end, they may not submit it in there. We've had cross sections that have been submitted where the proportions are different, and my goal is that they need to be understandable, not by me. I see them all the time, but by you guys or the neighbors. And we tell them, you need to change this cross section. You need to change this cross section, and they'll submit you that little itty bitty cross section that you see in there. But we do go through it and make sure that that we are looking at the slopes and what's going on, and we'll make issue of it if we feel like hey, you guys probably really should push them on this cross section or things like that. As an example.
As well as these minimum submission requirements, we're going to be bringing these before you, for the commission, just in case with the additional ones. Is right now with what's in the application, we don't have anything specifically in place for like for the arborist report and for the landscape plan, as well as we've added some additional components for stormwater to get some more information out of those submissions that we get. So we want to bring those additional minimum submission requirements before you guys, before we put them into the application, so that they're on the website then. Like, for instance, for stormwater, we had something on there about, making sure that we have the size of the detention pit, but then we want to make sure that we also have the distancing from the detention pit to said property line, to the home, to whatever. So when our inspectors are out there, they can have that distance actually indicated on the plans. However, that's not explicitly noted as a minimum submission requirement under the concept stormwater management section. So we want to make sure that, when we bring that before you guys, that we address that. So there's some sort of, smaller minimum submission requirement tweaks that we're going to bring before you guys.
Good.
And I can answer any questions about the process, but that's normally how staff goes through through the reviews, as well as it's a little bit more lengthy now too, of course, based on the material that we're now going towards with the tree preservation and of course the previous stormwater adoption and everything else. It's just, lengthy reviews.
It's pretty intense.
Then Jack, I have one more slide. set up regarding the reports now. So in your reports, for every petition, you'll get a report. The goal is always to have them ready the Friday before the meeting. It hasn't worked very well, but we're getting closer and closer to doing so. But because of that, the way we format your report is that the cover sheet has the summary of everything you need to know. It has the information about the application, what they're doing, why it has to go before the commission, and then our concerns, and we welcome that there are others. We're not going to be able to catch everything, but it's going to have our primary concerns that you need to be aware of. And then it'll have references to all the attachments that are included. All the attachments will be available to you that Friday prior. It's just the actual report in there. And then we always provide you a suggested motion. Our motions are always going to be in the affirmative, even though our recommendation may be denial, but we're required to give you a motion in terms of an affirmative. And then if you felt that it's not going to be approved, then the vote will fail or so. And then you'll have recommended conditions of approval that if I have to assume that if the commission approves that motion, then these things should come in place. And we make sure that the petitioner is aware of all these things that will be in place. Like you're going to have to submit an arborist report or something like that. And then we'll attach the report itself, which is a staff analysis that includes the background, the site plan review analysis, community design review. We'll go through each of those design principles. Jack's put a table together in there that kind of identifies how we, like massing, it's checked, but if you look at stormwater management, there's a concern. So we're trying to, making sure it's highlighted for you to be able to reference and speed through the review of the report. And if something's not applicable, he has it noted in there. Then we'll have an analysis of the concepts of how they're handling stormwater. We always provide how it is consistent with our comprehensive plan or is not. And then we provide you with map scenarios of that in there. So you have good information before you. I will note in there, because we're proud about that, but our reports are, last year were used by the American Planning Association as 5 of the top reports of an analysis. It was a KSU professor, so Jack doesn't recognize that we did something good.
KU professor,
Oh, yeah.
my enemy.
That's right. But we've had time to put pretty good, thorough reports in there. We've had other communities adopt our report format and some of the other documents that we put out in there. But I think it's good to know. I mean, we think about your time and the amount of effort that you're putting in. So we really try to summarize right on that front page what you need to know or should be aware of. That's based on what we feel you should be aware of. If there's ever anything else you think we should add on or thoughts that you think you would want us to consider, I mean, we're open to those too. But what we're trying to do is make sure we're efficient with your time in that process. Also, all of these developers, contractors know in advance, and that information is shared with them prior in there. So, any of these, like, I didn't know or nobody told me,
I
take
did in
it for
fact
what it's
inform
worth.
them and tell them.
But, it is set up in spreadsheets and all that to minimize mistakes or and to ensure that we're being consistent with these reviews in there. Prior to these code changes that this commission forwarded to the council and were adopted, I mean, we would be bombarded with 5 houses on one Tuesday in there. By changing this, now we kind of spread those things out. Petitioners like it because a lot of the times they're calling us like, if I get everything in now and I just submit my site plan on Friday and all that. So there's no more negotiations and things of that nature in there. So it's worked pretty well. And I think it's reflective of how we've seen, like, some of these meetings are not being bombarded anymore with all these applications. The last thing I will note is that by code, the commission is never obligated to approve a petition on its first review in there. And I'll hear from other applicants that talk highly of our review process, that we provide the presentation, that sometimes they don't even have to say anything to the commission, or just introduce themselves, in there, or that an action actually happens that first night in there. So, and sometimes they get spoiled that that's what it's supposed to be like all the time in there. But be cognizant. We'll give you the day it's introduced, and then we'll tell you how long you have to make a decision in there. Any application that comes in that we know is, it's bigger than, like it's the first house in the neighborhood, or it's a commercial project, and it's going to require some input. They know that they're just probably going to be introduced that first night, and things are going to be deferred to give you guys some time to think it over, mull it over, in there. So, and we'll, again, I try to avoid the surprises. That's the main goal.
I think your reports are great. And, even since the first time I was a part of it, I thought they were good, but you do find ways to keep improving it. And that little table that you've added on top has really saved me a lot of time. And that's absolutely fantastic.
And last thing is, we recognize too, like these are our opinions. Our opinions are based on our educational professional background in there, but they're not our neighbor, or the impact is not the same as an employee as it is as a resident. And we recognize that you guys may view something differently, and we urge you, you have a, a, a pretty good bully pet to express an opinion or a view in there, and help us, it helps us become better planners or think of things broadly in there. So the big goal is, we encourage your input, and we try to get all the other nitty gritty stuff done in advance, so we can hear, from you all more on the broader level, and have those discussions. So, again, I urge you, because again, if we don't hear feedback, and then for me, that I get worried something's not wrong, right? So.
And the last thing I'll say is regarding the conditions of approval. I don't know if you guys have looked very in depth on them, but majority of the conditions of approval are all universal for the homes. We have like a certain section of, I think, I want to say 6 or 7 conditions of approval that are applied to each agenda or item that comes in. So you'll see that those are pretty similar throughout the different staff reports, as well as after the approval, we will send them an approval notification. That will be an email to the petitioner with, greetings and everything, and then the entire list of those conditions, including the ones that were imposed by the commission the night prior. But we get those approvals out the day after the meeting, or after it had been approved.
All right, Chairman, that concludes, I think, Don, is there anything you want to provide, or so?
I have one question, and it's sometimes like when a petitioner hasn't submitted anything, but they want to just kind of bounce their ideas off of us. And I always feel kind of like it's difficult if we're just getting this, we're just looking at it. It's hard to know how we feel, and this is typically before there's a staff report, before you guys have had a chance. And I feel like that puts us in a difficult spot, especially if nobody says, "Oh, we think it's great." And then all of a sudden, staff reports find stuff, you bring it to our attention, and we're like, "Oh, yeah, this is bad."
Noted. And everything was going good until now. I want to hold your ears, like, okay. They're administer staff decisions that we make. A matter of fact, I made a commitment to somebody else coming up in August of, a proposal comes in, and I look at the code and things, or we have discussions and say, hey, what if we take it to the commission and just get some general thoughts? That's what my intent is.
Yeah.
And they're trying to make sure that it's not a commitment or any way, but because there are two ways. Somebody can approach me. I can tell them, no, that's not permitted by code. And if you want to change the code, here's the application. You got to pay this fee amount. Or I can say, hey, the last time we looked into that section was way back then. Things have changed. Um, you know, I'll bring it up to the commission and just get some general thoughts. With the intent not to put you in a position where you're committing to something or so. I'll be a little bit more cognizant of that. I do have one.
If we can get it ahead of time,
Mhm.
at least so we can review it rather than right
Yeah.
at the moment.
And there's where I kind of keep it distinct in there because I try to keep it as informal as possible. And if, and limit what I'm taking in as the record, I guess, lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And there, I'll be upfront,
But I think that, go ahead.
go ahead.
No,
I was gonna say, I'd almost in those situations prefer we don't have notice ahead of time, so you can, it is more informal and you can just say, well, sounds great, and we'll look forward to receiving your petition in the future, instead of having a more formalized advisory process.
I get it. I just then feel like I'm bound to what I've initially said.
That's my concern is like, we
Yeah.
give feedback, I think it'd be better if you do this, but then they come.
Right.
And then you get back feedback at that time. They're like, but you said that before, but it wasn't official before. And now you feel differently. And so
Right.
I'm torn. I mean,
Yeah, we had one, I'll use an example that it eventually it never happened. But we had one where, this property owner wanted to put a doggy daycare in there, and it was a property that until to this date is still undeveloped, and it's in the middle of our industrial park. And it's been over 20 years. It's like the only undeveloped property I have in the industrial park. And there was a doggy daycare in an industrial park. It's like not ideal, but what the heck, so brought it to the commission and she had this presentation and all that. And again, I think you might have been at there. It wasn't a commitment, but then the direction was, yeah, staff, why don't you continue to work with them? And that's what we did. And we drafted code language. And then we ultimately came back with some code language, got that going through the process. And then they put together some plans together. And then it was unfortunate. They had some family issues, and then they ended up selling the property in there. But it gave us some guidance because I really didn't know if a doggy daycare was really a good idea to have in the middle of an industrial park. But the industrial park had changed. It's more of a general office park, and it would have been a nice amenity for the local businesses. And it was consistent with the comprehensive plan about providing auxiliary uses for the businesses, is the way I looked at it. And but I didn't want to, I didn't think it was worth charging them for a unknown.
Right.
They were looking, and they were looking for that kind of approval where they didn't go through, an architect and have all of the plans drawn up, prepared, spend all that money to eventually come before us and us tell them that that won't work there. So it behooved them, honestly, to present it in a more general capacity to save that money.
I guess what I would like, I totally understand that. But if we had a chance to offer the opinion maybe at the next meeting or something like that, that way we had a chance to think about it, before if everyone goes around the table and says, yeah, we think this is going to work, and then they spend all this money, and then there's an issue, then I feel bad that they've spent all that money. Does that make sense?
But I'd also look at it as that they've come to us and also offered to take this before the commission. So I look at it as like, for instance, the doggy daycare example is if this person is saying that they would like to come and bring this idea, and then they get their whole site plan developed and we find out that there's, so many issues with this. I think that's kind of also on that person for trying to set up that time and go through that. It's just, I think it's as a result of what, can occur. I also do really like the idea of offering, maybe to take another meeting and come back on it or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Anybody else? Okay, all right, very good.
All right.
do we want to move on to the next agenda item?
I think it's 9 o'clock, and that's one of the things that, for our new members, there are some times that we go past 9, but we try to, minimize the meeting to 2 hours in there. Sometimes we can't control the number of items that come on in there. We've been working on this tree ordinance it's been well over a year in there. I won't call it a tree ordinance because it's not what we consider a tree ordinance, but it puts some regulations about trying to protect trees during construction in there. But I think we'll continue that discussion August 7th and they're given the time commitments. You guys do two meetings a month. We try to keep it again for those 2 hours. And outside of council, you guys put the most time in terms of meetings in there. And we do recognize you guys are volunteers.
I appreciate that.
I'll note August 7th, typically after appointments are made, we do then do elections for officers. So I wanted to bring that up. So I won't put it this time. I put it on the agenda as a heads up.
Right.
So for August 7th and so.
That'd be great. And so everybody think about if they want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I encourage, I mean, I've been a chairman for a long time, and it's always good to get new ideas, new people leading it, things like that. And I don't mind doing it, but I do tend to offer my opinions probably too much rather than, letting the group, come up with their own. So if anybody is any interest, do not hesitate. I would, it's not that I'm planning on stepping away from the board or anything like that. I would still like to be a member, but I would definitely offer up my chairman position. So think about it, so I just want to make sure that everyone knows you're not going to hurt my feelings by saying you want to do this. I would encourage it because it does give more balance or, to make sure everybody's opinion gets heard. And sometimes it can be a little stale. So think about it. Okay. No one has to make a decision tonight. But think of the elected offices as well. And I think we won't do the elections tonight, but we'll do it next time. And then we'll move on to meeting minutes. I would somebody like to acknowledge precious receipt of the meeting minutes from March 6th?
I'd also like to state there is a typo. That typo in the discussion portion will be addressed before I upload the meeting minutes tomorrow, if you guys acknowledge them.
Subject to that correction, I'd like to acknowledge receipt of the meeting minutes from March 6, 2025.
So acknowledged by Sam Wallach, and we'll move on now to reports. Carlos.
I don't think we have. Okay.
Microphone, sir.
A couple of things that are scheduled. Our next meeting's, of course, August 7th. August 13th is coffee with the mayor. August 16th is the same throwback, so you'll have the schedules there. And then our second meeting in August is the 21st. Real quickly, outside of developments, you've seen lot 3 up at Olive Crossing. It's moving along. It's getting exciting. We're getting the plan reviews for the Paris Baguette, which will be on the Aldi side, and then the Brass Tap that's going to be on the interstate side. And then they have 3 interior tenants. 2 have been noted. I think it's Tropical Smoothie and Verizon have signed contracts. Across the street behind the Chevys and CVS is the Irvington Place Apartments. That's proceeding pretty well. They're looking hopefully for a early 2026 occupancy on that. That's 204 apartment units on that side. Outside of that, and if there's any other questions, we have activity going across the street. It's still going slow, but it's moving along. That's going to be 34 townhouses that will be placed there on Dealman. And those are the bigger projects we have going on right now.
Brian?
Apologies, not usually this late, as we said. A few things to mention is at the city council, Olive Crossing, as Carlos mentioned, I'm not sure, it was public record, so I can say it out loud, at least, is the lot that was next to the apartment building that initially was a business. The thought is that's going to be a restaurant, potentially. right now. Don't know names, don't know anything like that, but since the mayor said that, the city clerk or admin said it out loud, I'll say it the same. So I think that's interesting and exciting. A couple other things, I think on August 2nd, there's an Olivet garden tour as well. If people want to be participate in that, I think that would be good. And then I think Steam Academy has something at Domo too. I believe I saw it on Facebook and as well. So the new business in town. So more things to go for that. And then just interesting, we had the zoning board, the parks. What was Carlos? Apologies. The Olivet Parks Foundation.
Yes, I'm not too familiar, but the city does have a Parks Foundation.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
a
that you
unique
guys-
thing where it got donations and then it's able to use it for specific funds. So that we had our first meeting in forever last time. It was interesting because I brought it up as we think about trees. It was one of the places I know I've always been an advocate for. If people can't put trees, then maybe there's a fund they can donate to. And I know the city's generally not against it. Already got the, city manager looking at me in a side eye, but I'm like, hey, I'm gonna still propose it. But this might be one where there's a place we can put it because there is actually a way to disperse it, so it's a little cleaner. So just something to think about in the tree
Good.
area when we get to it. So on that, thank you to everyone, as always.
All right. Anybody else? Any discussions? Go ahead.
I was just gonna mention that unfortunately, I'm on vacation August 7th week. How that a week
It
for
happens.
having children because there's no coverage. So unfortunately, I'm out of town.
And August 21st is Meet the Teacher at school, so I'm out the 21st.
Okay. Anybody else who's going to not be able to make it for Meet the Teacher night?
That's for my school.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh,
ours is
for your
okay.
school.
No,
Okay, okay.
I think I might be out of town on August 7th. Might be back.
If you can let us know or let Carlos know, that would be great.
Because it's a vacation for us too, right?
Right,
before
it's
school.
Yeah.
it's the week.
Yeah, so I'll note for the
Early.
two new members and the veterans here too. I mean, the earlier we know it is appreciated because then we can coordinate or make sure that the applicants are aware. August 7th, now that I got a full board, we do have that meeting, but I'm down to 5. So again, if you have a conflict or something comes up, let me know. In there right now, we don't have any petition agendas in there, so it'll be more like a discussion again. In there, I do have 2 items possibly for the August 21st meeting in there. And I should have noted earlier, sorry for taking up more time, but we had at our zoning board of appeals 2 petitions for residential additions. One was 713 Lantern or 733 Lantern and 1016 Dolores. And the reason I bring them up is that they needed setback variances. And again, talking with the board and looking at these, they granted these variances and there were justifiable hardships for those, but they preserved 2 existing homes and allow them to do some pretty nice and unique additions to maintain some of that older housing stock. And I think they did a really good job about that. The next step for these will be to come to the commission. And again, they're aware that there may be some architectural or design aspects in there, but for those that are concerned about that, we just get the tear downs or there's a lot of tear downs. This was a process that we were able to facilitate, work with the board in there and get these 2 new homes, to be able to make them viable and continue as part of our housing stock. So.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we will adjourn. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all.
I'm gonna be out of town on Zoom though.
We'll mute you.
You can mute
Good night.
me.
Thanks for being here.
I will do it if you don't want to do it anymore, but I don't want to do it if you still want to do it.
It's not that I want to, I will.
Okay.
It's funny, because when I'm on the Board of Appeals,
Yeah.
and I sit to the side.
Yeah.
Like, trying to, I feel like that I'm supposed to be right.
Oh. Well, how long have you been